Look, Arsenal are the massive favourites, and so they should be at home, chasing the title. They have to win. The last game that Arsenal would want after losing in the Cup on Sunday is Tottenham.
Tottenham go to Arsenal on Wednesday in the North London derby. Both teams come off the back of gruelling FA Cup ties on Sunday, with the Gunners losing on penalties at home to Manchester United and Tottenham needing extra time to get past National League side Tamworth. It's the battle of the beleaguered squads at the Emirates, and we are back in the Tactics Exposed studio. Me, Will Pugh, joined by Sun Sports tactical guru Dean Scoggins. And Dean, you've got 5 tactical areas that may explain how your beloved Tottenham Hotspur could end Arsenal's title hopes on Wednesday night at the Emirates.
Yeah, first of all, let's say well done Tamworth. We've got to say well done
let's
Tamworth.
Say well done,
tactically superb Tamworth. But yeah, look, I'm not going to say that Tottenham are going to win this game, but we're going to look at the areas that both teams are going to be really trying to expose in that North London derby. First, it's Spurs' organised chaos. They are not as chaotic as everyone thinks they are. Second is underlap, overlap, wandering free. We'll look at the areas that Spurs target, where they'll go at Arsenal. Number 3, Sterling effort. Without Bukayo Saka, of course, Arsenal are going to need Raheem Sterling and in these key places to attack Spurs. Number 4 is art stoppers. And they've become a bit stodgy, Arsenal, not really scoring that many goals the last few weeks. We'll look at why that is. And then King Dom's come. Tottenham's big striker will be the key man away at the Emirates.
Yeah. It really is an intriguing time for this game, to be quite honest, isn't it? Tottenham sort of floundering mid-table this season, having a really peculiar time of it. We do have to say well done to Tamworth, by the way. Sun-sponsored Tamworth. Who,
we were in their corner, literally, with the corner flags. That was
exactly
fantastic.
That. Yeah, we gave a really, or the Tamworth, sorry, gave a really good account of themselves. But Ange never seemed flustered for the entire game, right? And lots of the rhetoric around it was Tottenham have beaten Liverpool 1-0 in the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final. Lucas Bergvall, of course, who played in that game at Tamworth. And then they go and struggle. Ultimately, they got over the line and they're in a good position off the back of both games. Arsenal lose at home to Manchester United, albeit on penalties, but it really is, it's more about the players who aren't playing for these teams rather than the ones who are. So we'll start with Tottenham. It's most of Tottenham's defensive line: Romero, Mickey van der Ven, Destiny Udogie, all out, as well as a few others.
And Rodrigo Bentancur with concussion as well, which is a really big one. But yeah...
But talk to me about the organised chaos and how Tottenham, Ange may have tweaked his approach based on his late...
Yeah, it really is. Everyone thinks it's a really wild way of playing. And obviously that's because they've scored loads of goals. They conceded plenty from silly mistakes and where they give the ball away. But they have really been hit by injuries. Let's not get away from this. Ange has a very rigid structure that the players have to play within. This is not just about go out there and go all over the place.
Yep.
Okay, so it's 4-3-3,
yep.
But then there are 2 sets of players, okay? There's a left-hand set and a right-hand set. And in the last few weeks, Ange has actually adapted. Heaven forbid people don't think he adapts. And one of the reasons he gets so spiky in press conferences and post and pre-match is because people think that he's not working on tactics. Of course he is.
Yeah.
It's just that this is part of a process that they're going through, and there's a lot of young players making a lot of silly mistakes, okay?
He's the most tactically intriguing manager in the league, isn't he?
It's incredibly intriguing. And we look at it first of all, okay? The centre-backs will split when they've got the ball with the goalkeeper. They've got a brand new goalkeeper who's going to go to the Emirates, and we're going to see them pass out from the back even more than they have been so far. He's very, very good on the ball, Antonin Kinski. And, you know, we saw in the Liverpool game, I was behind the goal, actually, and it was heart in mouth a lot of the time, but he's very, very confident on the ball. But the Tottenham centre-backs will split. It'll most likely be Archie Gray and Dragozin because of the injuries elsewhere. They've done OK, those two. We'll come back to them in the high line in a minute. But then a Basuma or a Sarr will drop in between those two to come and receive the ball. Then you talk about the fullbacks. And I look at these the 2 Tottenham sides as 2 wheels.
Yeah.
OK, they've got 3 players each side.
These are the wide sets.
These are the wide players, yeah. So you've got maybe, let's call them 8s, one side or the other, and that could be Maddison one side and Kulusevski the other, or Sarr one side and Maddison the other, if Kulusevski does play right wing. And then you end up with the 2 fullbacks, the 2 wide 8s, and the two wingers, and they operate together. They don't really cross over very much. They operate in those positions where if the left midfield player comes in deep to receive the ball, the 8 goes in there and then the fullback will underlap. So they operate as 2-3s. They don't really go across the field very often to those.
Quite.
They go up to the back and round the outside. And it's very rigid. Ange does not want them crossing over and drifting over into other positions. Although those fullbacks go forwards, they occupy inside positions. It's not like inverting where they just go into midfield. They go much more into sort of a number 8, number 10 position because they're interchanging with those around the outside. It is rigid and it's based around a ball going out to the wing and then there being able to be a first-time ball in behind.
So just to clarify for anyone who's trying to picture this, we've got graphics and screen overlays as usual, but the only players really for Tottenham, bar the goalkeeper, who aren't involved in these two wide wheels are the two centre-backs and the centre-forward.
Yes, and the holding midfielder. But he will mop up in that area and try not to get in there. But a lot of the times that we see mistakes from Spurs is when that midfield player gets a bit carried away and, gets dragged upfield and then gets counter-attacked. But other than that, they are rigid. And from their average positions and from where these 8s and 10s are, it's very difficult with Spurs to identify which those are, but they are in those positions where Maddison, let's say, is playing as the left side, will work with Son and Udogie. It'll be Jed Spence instead of Destiny Udogie this time at left back. And then the other side, whether it's Johnson or Kulusevski as the winger, is working with Porro and then be it Sarr or Kulusevski or Bergvall in the inside right position. So they're very rigid. It does make them sort of susceptible to teams setting up against them. And Arsenal in the North London derby at the Tottenham Stadium did that. We did a show on how Arteta dropped midfield players inside to stop that underlap.
So what does that allow Tottenham to do? Because what you'll often see, I'm assuming, with the rotation is that's why you sometimes see the fullback inexplicably high up the pitch and going in those like underlapping channels. That's why, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. And they dominate possession as well. They've got very, very high possession stats. They give the ball away in silly areas far too often. But then what it does mean is that you've got your ball players, so your Maddison or your Kulusevski, your Papsars, your Yves Bissoumas, who have got the ball in the key areas of the field. And then you get your flyers, your fullbacks and your wingers targeting the corners of those boxes.
So that's point 2, Dino, right? Underlap, overlap and wandering free.
Yeah, not quite the Wombles of Wimbledon, but yeah. But no,
right, but so just that's point 2. I'm assuming that all plays into that system.
It does, yeah. So Tottenham don't cross it generally very much. In the last few weeks,
as in like a traditional cross, 1995.
Get to the byline and cross it over.
Whip it into Duncan.
Yeah, the last few weeks they have crossed it from a deep position where Pedro Porro and Kulusevski will target Solanke. And we'll come back to Solanke, but they will at certain times cross it from deep. But where teams drop back against Spurs, because you force them back into those positions by playing an underlap, right? So let's talk about an underlap. So we know what an overlap is, yeah? So the winger goes into a corner of an area and the fullback goes up the outside.
You're thinking Roberto Carlos, even
Absolutely.
Gary Neville
Gary Neville up the outside of David Beckham, bombing on, which either means you pass the ball to Gary Neville because he's going to cross it, or it takes the fullback away, enable Beckham the space to drift the ball in, okay? They were the masters at it.
The archetypal.
Absolutely, exactly that. But now what Spurs do is because the wingers hug the touchline, really, really wide. We're talking Johnson on one side and Son on the other, right on the touchline. Chalk on your boots. I've said that a few times. Then what that means is that if your Solanke comes over to whichever side the ball is, then the fullback goes up the inside channel.
Yeah, so that would be... Line. If a team are playing a 4 at the back, that's typically between their left back and their left centre back.
Exactly that. And so you've got the left back gets drifted, it gets dragged out to where Johnson is on that line.
Yeah.
You've got Kulusevski or Solanke occupying that left centre back. Yeah. And then the full back goes up the underlap channel into that side.
And there's the space.
And that's because they're targeting cutbacks into the area. Spurs score a lot of the same goal, tap-ins across the area. And it does frustrate a lot of fans when that underlap isn't on, that they go back and recycle the ball.
Yeah.
But that's very rare that they go into that zone around the edge of the box, because that's where you get counter-attacked on. And that's where Ange gets very frustrated, where the structure and the system is not rigid enough, where it is rigid, but they give the ball away in those areas and you get counter-attacked the other way. But yeah, Jed Spence will play instead of Destiny Udogie. Has had a really good few weeks, and he's a right-footed fullback playing on the left, which a lot of the time doesn't work, and because you've got big issues. But in the days where you're playing against wingers who often cut back inside on their stronger foot because you're playing the opposite sides, it helps. And also in a Tottenham formation where you play underlap football, often he's receiving the ball on his right foot going up that underlap channel because he's been played in that way. So it's not as big of a problem for Spurs as it might be for other teams.
Look, just before we move on to point 3 and talk about Raheem Sterling and what an impact he's going to have if Arsenal want to succeed in this game, just talk to me a little bit about how Ange Postecoglou has had to adjust and perhaps rein back on his... I know he always says, it's just who I am, mate, it's just how I play.
That's all part of the narrative.
Yeah, but given the injuries that Tottenham have got recently, particularly those defensive ones that we talked about, you think Ange may have tweaked it just ever so slightly?
Yeah, he definitely has. He absolutely has. And it doesn't fit with the narrative of Ange Ball and all of that. Look, they've not been good enough in the Premier League, but any team that loses their best two centre-backs, if you take Konate and Van Dijk out of Liverpool for the amount of time that Van der Ven and Romero have been out of the Tottenham team, do you really think Liverpool will be that clear at the top of the table?
And Udogie's been key to what
absolutely. And if you took Saliba and Gabriel out of the Arsenal team, they'd be nowhere near. Look, Tottenham have not been good enough for the players that they've got, but the injuries have been huge. So it's kind of why they're stuck in the middle of the table at the moment. But he's definitely altered slightly. We saw that unbelievably high line against Chelsea last year, which became the big thing for everyone to wrap around. Against Liverpool in the 6-3 game a few weeks ago, there were some pretty wild decisions from the Tottenham fullbacks and centre-backs of the positions they went to, especially
Not
Dragons
the cup game.
No, the League 6-3 game when they lost at home. The cup game was much better, and the last 2 weeks have been much better. They're deeper. Obviously, Archie Gray and Dragozin are not as quick as Van der Ven and Romero. So they've conceded a bit of field position where they've dropped back in. The reason they push up so high, the reason Ange wants to play with such a high line is to make the pitch smaller in the areas that you want it to be small. And then when a team tries to stretch the pitch, you can then pick them off going the other way. So that's why you want it big at some times and small at others. So that's why they push right up the field. But they have changed. The fullbacks aren't going as forward as quickly. Porro has been much more disciplined the last few weeks. And Jed Spence, obviously being a new player to the Tottenham team, and as you say, how good Destiny Udogie has been, they've definitely been a little bit more controlled.
And you were talking about the one pivot before. It feels like we've seen a lot more of like Sarr and Basuma rather than Sarr or Basuma.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's where James Maddison hasn't played as much football. So and Kulusevski's been playing as sort of the lone 10 a little bit, which has really put the pressure on Kulusevski, who's a machine, to try and be involved in both sides of those wheels in that rigid formation, because he wants to be involved on both sides of the pitch, which is great. But yeah, they've come away from that in big games recently. Manchester City, Liverpool, they've played pretty well, but they've gone to Basuma plus one other. Bentancur's been a huge miss this season. There was injury, then there was suspension, a ban, and then now it's concussion. And he's been the one that was most flexible in that position. But yeah, we may see Basuma and Bergvall, we may see Basuma and Sarr, and then Kulusevski ahead. I think it'd be very brave if we see Basuma, Kulusevski and Maddison at Arsenal away.
Yeah, of course. Right, Dino, point 3, sterling effort. Now, Arsenal also ravaged with injuries, but weirdly, at the other end of the pitch, Tottenham have got no defenders, Arsenal have got no attackers. Bukayo Saka, Ethan Nwaneri, and now Gabriel Jesus injured in that Manchester United home FA Cup defeat. What do you think that means for Arsenal, and how are they going to try and hurt Tottenham? Because we've done quite a lot on Tactics Exposed on Bukayo Saka. We've done how to stop him with ghost defenders and double and trebling up on him. We've also done how impactful he is and how he's sort of modern day Iron Robin almost, with his cutting in on his left-hand side, on his left foot, sorry, from the right-hand side so effectively. And everyone knows what he's going to do. He's impossible to stop. Saka's a huge miss. So are all the other attackers. What does Raheem Sterling have to do? And will he be able to fill those boots?
Saka's a huge miss, right? An absolutely massive miss. We're talking Salah out of Liverpool. You know, we're talking Solanke out of Tottenham.
Bowen out of West Ham.
Yeah, mate. Let's go with that. Yeah. If you want to bring that in, yeah. You know, Rodri out of Manchester City.
Sorry, I thought we were doing right wingers. Fair enough.
Yeah, but you know, the size of the player, and yeah, look, we've talked about where Saka receives the ball. Arsenal are very dominant down their right-hand side. They want to attack down their right side. Shouldn't be underestimated that they've got two right-footed centre-backs as well. Yep. And then they come to the right a lot naturally. Declan Rice drifts to the left but passes the ball to the right. Okay, so a lot of the time, it's a lot of teams are sort of 30, 30 and 30 across the field. That's certainly how Liverpool are. Arsenal percentages of where they attack. Yep. Arsenal are much more down the right. So that's because of Saka, and that's because of the position that Odegaard picks up on that inside right. So Spurs will be very aware of that. But also what Arteta will be asking Sterling to do is just do the job that Saka does in where he receives the ball. Right. So he comes to feet, but he doesn't receive it with his back to goal. Yep. What he wants is to take it on the run, off the touchline, into that inside area.
Almost like a diagonal at the end,
diagonal
the corner
run
of the penalty
where
box.
you receive the ball on your back foot, taking the ball infield. Yep. And that means that if Havertz makes a run inside, then they're crossing over, very difficult to defend. It means Odegaard is always there for the lay-off ball, which then he's going to play a ball maybe to the overlapping fullback going the other way. And then the other thing is that Martinelli's going to fly up the left, and that could be the ball that goes in behind. So Arteta hates players receiving the ball static and playing it backwards afterwards. So he'll be asking Sterling to do that. Right, we talked about Jed Spence on his right foot. That's going to be a problem for Sterling.
Well, that was my next question.
Because if Sterling comes inside there, then Jed Spence naturally is going to come inside and block him on his right foot. So there's a big role again for Jurriën Timber in this game to go up the outside, and maybe Sterling will lay the ball off quickly so that Odegaard plays it in there. So it's almost like a three-pass move where it goes in behind Timber on the overlap, which will be a big threat to Spurs in this position. But look, we've not seen enough from Sterling yet. He was bought for this purpose. He was bought because they didn't have enough players in attacking positions. He's an international footballer, stack loads of Premier League experience, but we haven't seen it for Arsenal yet. He had a indifferent time against Manchester United at the weekend. He was getting the ball in the right areas. He was very positive against his fullback, but that yard of pace that's gone slightly is going to be a bit of a concern for Arsenal. And look, perhaps the alternative is Trossard there. But, you know, but then again, you're not exactly got pace. No. And the reason Arsenal have been so good is pace Martinelli, pace Saka, those sides.
It feels like you've got more of the sort of two-footed threat with Trossard, but I totally agree with what you're saying. Just quickly then on Sterling, Dino, obviously a loan deal from Chelsea at the moment. Do you think he's done enough for Arsenal to keep him?
Not yet, he hasn't, no, but there's the real opportunity in this game. And look, they really need him to do it. You know, they're expected to win this game. Not a free hit for Tottenham because they're so far down the league and the expectation in the North London derby is so large. But Arsenal are expected to win this game. They need to win this game to stay with Liverpool. And if they're going to do that, they need someone like Sterling to have a big game. If he does have a big game and gives Spurs a right nightmare, then you might be saying at the end of the season, yeah, let's keep him because he gives us that threat.
Art stoppers, Dino, Mikel Arteta and his Arsenal side. A few rumblings of discontent around Arteta this season. Few Arsenal fans suggesting maybe it's time for him to move on. But North London derbies are where you do your reputation. Loads of good or loads of damage. Talk to me about Mikel Arteta.
Yes, stodgy was the word I used in
We're all a bit stodgy in the new year, Dino.
Yeah, we are, but Arsenal very much so. And first of all, look, Newcastle, they could still turn around that League Cup game, that Carabao Cup game from 2-0 down. Let's not say they're out of that yet. You know, they're obviously out of the FA Cup now. They're still in the Champions League and they get a couple of good results in the Prem and everything starts to look very different, OK? But what they've got to solve is this attacking problem. They're struggling to score goals. And obviously without Saka, that's going to be more difficult. Nobody's overlooking that fact. But what they do in possession is they're very much looking to make sure they don't get counter-attacked.
Yeah.
And so they're set up in attack to stop a counter-attack going the other way. So that means Marino, that means Rice, that means Partey, sitting in a position where it's called backing up play. Yeah. Right. So coaches will talk about it all the time to midfielders and defenders. You don't just stay with your man, you back up play. So
this is when Arsenal are in possession.
When Arsenal are in possession. So someone like Declan Rice is a master at it, where he screens across. Yep. So the ball goes into Havertz, and then it goes wide to the left to Martinelli maybe, or to a fullback. Declan Rice will be screening across.
Right.
And so if the ball breaks, I'm there to take the ball. But Arsenal do it with two men. Yeah. They do it with two players. So whereas Manchester City just do it with Rodri when he's fit and available, again, the best in the world at it.
Spoke about Tottenham already, usually one.
Tottenham usually one, has been two in the last few weeks, which is why they've scored less and conceded less. But then also Gravenberch is an absolute superstar at it for Liverpool, where the ball breaks, they win it, and then they play it back in again. But because Arsenal are set up with two extra players, if you like, and then two defenders, and then they invert a fullback, that then means they've got one less player in attack. Yeah. And that means they've got one less player bombing past the ball, making those, lung-busting runs through the line.
The underlaps.
Yeah, the underlaps, overlaps, and the ones that make the defenders backtrack and then cause so much problems. So they're looking a bit rigid, a little bit stodgy, and they're going to have to be a bit braver, especially if Spurs score, which they often do. They're going to have to be a bit braver in possession, I think, to change this around. And they're going to need a much better performance from Kai Havertz than they got against Manchester United at the weekend. It
does sound like it's going to be a bit of a battle of who's got the cojones, dare I say it, to go for it. Or both managers, it's got one of them. It's either going to be a stale, dull 0-0, 1-0, 1-0.
It's not often like that with Spurs.
Well, true, no.
But as you mentioned quite rightly, lots of defenders missing for Spurs and lots of attacking threat missing for Arsenal. So, does that cancel out each other in midfield? But look, I know from a Tottenham perspective, they quite like it to be cancelled out. Right,
last one, Dino. Dominic Solanke was one of the big guns Tottenham had to bring on to get past National League Tamworth. 16th they are in the National League, Tamworth, who Tottenham drew 0-0 with.
Tough place to go, Pat.
Yeah, notoriously tough. Same surface as the one we got here. Dominic Solanke was one of the big name players that Ange Postecoglou brought on, along with Heung-min Son and Dejan Kulusevski, to get Tottenham over the line at the Lamb Ground in the Midlands. You are a huge fan of Dominic Solanke and think that there's loads of good work he's doing that fans aren't particularly seeing.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of his. Probably his biggest, I would say. When we signed him, there was a lot of.
The tattoo was a bit much, to be honest.
Look, when he signed, I was over the moon. There was a lot of debate over whether Spurs should go to Ivan Toney or to Dominic Solanke. I wanted Solanke. Mainly for work rate. I think in front of goal they're probably fairly similar, but his effort, his tracking, his pressing is absolutely wonderful in those areas. And I don't say this lightly. He is world class. There is a lot more that becomes with a world class striker to be called a world class striker, which is putting more balls in the back of the net and doing a lot more. But his team ethic is just sensational. And what he does, I've talked about this in previous shows, is the rope. Bring the defender with you, rope-a-dope, bring the defender with you, suck them into areas they don't want to be. He's physical, he pins players, so he'll target Saliba rather than Gabriel in the air and over the head of Saliba, because Saliba, Rolls-Royce of a defender, don't get me wrong, but prefers the ball on the ground than he does in the air. Yep. And Solanke and Spurs will go for that a little bit more, especially with the new keeper pinging it long. What Solanke does is, if you think that we talked about Spurs in the underlap and overlap areas, those wheels outside, he's the pivot. He's the one where they play into and off. He's dragging defenders all over the place. But what teams do against Spurs is they want to squeeze the ball into midfield because Solanke is such a threat. Yeah. But then what Solanke does is what he did against Chelsea, is he has the ball in, he wants a defender to engage him so that then he can flick it round the corner and then off goes Brennan Johnson and Heung-min Son. So he is a real threat. He hasn't got as many goals so far as Tottenham would have liked, but Tottenham have scored so many goals as a team. the pre-assist I want to talk about. You're laughing. I knew you'd laugh.
There's enough stats in the game.
Yeah, more stats. We want more stats. Okay, so this is where the way Tottenham play, as I said, they score a lot of sort of identical goals.
The amount of goals I've seen of a Tottenham player zooming in at the back post and knocking it in from 4 yards away, in my head, is always Brennan Johnson.
Yeah, Brennan Johnson, Son at the other side. You know, Werner sticks it in Rosette. But what it is so the cross is the easy bit. Okay, the cross and the finish are the easy bit. The difficult bit that's getting not getting noticed enough is Solanke going in and the pre-assist where he grabs the ball, he controls it, and then he plays the right pass to a winger who then crosses it for somebody else. He's the striker. Really, he wants to be in the area scoring goals. Of course he does. But he's doing such a fabulous job for the team. He knows when to press. We've talked about that a lot before. Don't press when you're on your own. You know, when you've not got anybody with you, and make sure what he does, and he did it brilliantly against Chelsea, he did it brilliantly in the 1-0 win over Liverpool, is what he does is he looks over his shoulder and sees where there are 3 players one side and 1 the other. So he forces the goalkeeper to go where there's only 1 player. So it's intelligent play, and Spurs are going to see a lot more of him. Arsenal will be hoping they don't see much of him on Wednesday. What, Sunday? Wednesday.
Could be, it sounds like in a game where lots of people are missing, it's the players who are available that could make all the difference. You are convinced, Dino, that if Tottenham win this game, it's Arsenal's title hopes done. Very, very briefly, you got 20 seconds. What's the score going to be?
I don't like predicting Spurs. I never bet on Spurs. You know, that's the fan in me. That Arsenal are the massive favourites, and so they should be at home, chasing the title. They have to win. Spurs have got enough threats to cause them a right problem that the last game that Arsenal would want after losing in the Cup on Sunday is Tottenham.